So the Celtics title charge ends at game 7. The comeback did not happen. Where do they go from here? Is it time to shake things up? We'll be discussing that, and we'll taking a look ahead at the NBA Finals. Will it be Denver's first ever championship or Jimmy Butler's first ever ring? We'll be looking at the key matchups and what we should expect moving into the finals. It's time to go coast to coast.
The mailman doesn't deliver on a Sunday.
If you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball.
Anthony for three. Bang! J.R. Smith! We just saw men fly. LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Cleveland! This is for you!
All right, and welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast. I am Ronan Gaine. Joining me as always is Chris Nambu. Thank you all so much for making Coast to Coast your first podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow wherever you are getting your podcasts. And to start it off, Chris, how you doing?
Dude, I'm great. First of all, if everyone's watching, I have to say this is not my choice. I was not going for the Mike Ditka look. I had to get fit tested. So for when it comes at me from a mustache, I don't know if it's in. The 80s are kind of back-ish a little bit, but I'm feeling a little naked here. But I'm feeling great, man. Boston is definitely reeling. Being here, just feeling the pulse. It just feels like disgusted, unfortunately. That feels the general consensus. I have the honor to be in the awe of Boston sports and always see like how excited everyone gets, how cocky everyone gets every year when every sports team is winning a championship somewhere, somehow, some way. And this city, I mean, they expect it. They expect greatness, and this has been a tough couple months for Boston in particular. It's first sports city ever to have two home team lose in Game 7. So they got the Bruins losing in Game 7, and then they had Boston now losing Game 7. And Ronan, you take it away. Like, what's your first reaction here as we're entering a couple days following that collapse? We've heard all the pundits talk about it. We've seen all these fake trades. We've heard all the Jaylen Brown stuff that we can. Like, where do we even start?
We'll get to that in a minute. Before we get into that, I will just mention that a couple of movements have happened in the coaching market. We've seen a lot of firings in the off season, and Philly have made a quick move. They've appeared to have agreed a deal with Nick Nurse. Adrian Wojnarowski reporting that. What do you think? What do you think on that move? I like that move. I think Philly have been aggressive, and they went out and got one of the top available coaches out there in.
I think that first of all, it's funny that these hirings are being made now, and there's it's a big deal, very big deal, for Doc Rivers to be moving on, and it's kind of a perfect time for that to happen in terms of the news cycle, because no one's talking about it. Everyone's just talking about how the Celtics lost Game 7. And in terms of what Nick Nurse is going to bring to the table, I love him as a coach. We've seen, we obviously saw him in a success with the Raptors, bringing them a championship, and what he did with that young group as well. I do wonder how much buy-in you're going to get from Harden and Embiid. I believe that, Harden and Murray are connected, and that they are going to make decisions that align with each other, and Murray's not going to necessarily do something that, is not signed off. But in terms of Nurse's coaching style, in terms of his demands he makes of his players, in terms of how he communicates with these players, it always has felt like he's been a type of coach that, really pushes his guys and really gets in on them. And from what people have said, there's a lot of complexities that go into the kind of sets he wants to run and the communication he has on defense. So it's not necessarily the most seamless fit in the world, but I think he's an incredibly talented coach, and I think they need to switch things up. And I think that's what we've been asking for. We've been asking for a coach who's willing to think outside the box with the talent they have. So at the end of the day, that's got to be a great move for them.
Yeah, I think I'm excited for it. I think Tyrese Maxey is going to be an interesting watch here and see what way he grows under a coach like Nick Nurse. And another move, not done yet, but the Pistons are reported to be very aggressively trying to approach Monty Williams and reportedly going to offer him a $10 million per year deal to come down to Detroit. That's a we want you and we don't want anyone else to have you kind of move from Detroit there.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, you have to think about if you're making that hire right now, you have to understand that it's the reality that the Celtics are going to be thinking about their next coach. And I don't see any reason why Monty wouldn't be at the top of that list if they're looking for someone with championship experience, someone who's clearly managed egos and just been overall a solid leader in the locker room. And Detroit, if they can pull this off, I mean, that's no better person you can imagine in terms of a guy who can cultivate culture, a guy who can really demand greatness out of his players without, bringing them down. It seems like everyone who has encountered him on and off the court has had amazing things to say. And it seems like they've really prioritized putting together a good culture there. I mean, not that Sadiq Bey was like necessarily not a culture guy or a good guy there, but he wasn't fully bought in. And although he's a talented player, they didn't want someone who wasn't fully bought in. So they moved on. And I mean, just on the player level, they want guys who are gonna really buy into the future there. And I think having him at the helm with Cade and with the rest of their guys there, that's going to be fantastic if that works out.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. It'll be interesting to see what the reaction would be from Monty Williams and his group. It would be interesting to see if he wants to go to a project like that or wants another shot at a team that's ready to compete right here now. But let's get into the big talking points. The Celtics. There's a lot of question marks now that they have gone out. They kept on hanging on in, and it was kind of my instant reaction. It was kind of like they kind of went down like a vet team, like an older veteran team. Like they struggled a little bit against that Atlanta Hawk team. I think a lot of people expected them to easily sweep by. Then they go up against Philly, and they were right up against it. Eventually get by them in 7, just by having that little bit more nous, their star performer just stepping up that little bit more. And then they go and face the Miami Heat, and they're down 3-0, and they're able to fight back, but they eventually just don't have enough in the crunch game and get cleaned out. But obviously that's not the case with this team. Yeah, they got a couple of vets, so for the most part, this is still a very young, vibrant team. But it was a really weird postseason for the Boston Celtics. It only died right at the last second because there was Game 7 of the conference finals. Like they could have. Jason Tatum doesn't roll his ankle. Maybe we're talking about them playing against the Denver Nuggets, but it was a very strange postseason, and I'd be inclined to say it's the time to really not overreact. But I also think there's aspects there where you're thinking we've seen enough from this team to know that there's maybe a big decision to be made with both the coaching and the roster.
Yeah, and I think it's I'm glad we finally gotten away from the Tatum is 18 joke. It's still funny, but the young thing needs to be qualified here because Marcus Smart's been on the Celtics for almost a decade. Jaylen Brown's been there for coming on 7 years now. Jason Tatum, 6 years. Al Horford's like he's on the wrong side of 30. He's gonna be 37 next year.
Older than that, man.
So, I mean, in terms of their core, it's not a team that is necessarily just starting out. So I think it's we're beyond the point now where it's like just give them time. We're at the point now where evaluation and action upon that evaluation has to take place, because I think what can we see as common themes? So I don't think it's an overreaction to say that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and I'm sure if you follow basketball, like that, this is not a nuanced or new take, but those two guys are not elite playmakers off the dribble. When it comes to the playoffs, when it comes to the regular season, fantastic, does a lot of things. But when I say elite in the playoffs, I mean I'm talking the guys are going to take you all the way, that you put the ball in their hands every single play, and they are going to take care of the ball. They're going to find the best shot, and they're going to do great things every night in, night out, with consistency. And I'm just saying that from a playmaking perspective. And that's something that they've shown they can't do. And I say they, and I'm talking 80%, Jaylen Brown. I mean, Jason Tatum, you look at the numbers, and the numbers are fine, not terrible. But Jaylen Brown clearly has demonstrated that he's a fantastic off-ball scorer, great slasher. He's great attacking the closeout, and he can get really hot from three, and he can attack in the mid-range at 3-level scorer. I mean, the guy's fantastic as a scorer. But this is not new. This is not the time where you say, oh, he's young, he's going to figure out how to manage that. I just think that is not his game, and that I think that's a fair thing to say at this point. So I think if we can get all that out of the way, get away from this youth conversation, get away from an overreaction to something that's honestly just, fact at this point. It's not just one game. It's been 3 years now of seeing this. So what do we do with that information on the cusp of him being a Supermax eligible free agent, on the cusp of a new CBA that's going to really lock down on teams having multiple Supermax players? These are real things to discuss now. This isn't a kick it down the road. This is pretty much right now type deal. So, with all that considered, is this really just, let's just try it again next year, re-sign him 1 year older? We're still relatively young. That's a safe option, but is that the right option?
I want to say yes. I want to say you think how the impact the injuries might have had, the impact possibly the change in coaching had, but I think it's time probably to really strongly consider breaking up this duo of Tatum and Brown. Like I something in my head is always like the idea that there's always the guy everyone knows on every team. There's always that guy. Like we know with the Miami Heat, Jimmy Butler's that guy. Other guys are going to step up, but Jimmy Butler's that guy. With the Nuggets, yeah, Jamal Murray's been unbelievable, really, really impressive. But Nikola Jokic is that guy. With the Boston Celtics, it's very clear, I think, from their point of view and from the way they're covered in the media, that Jason Tatum is that guy. And you could argue the stats-wise, he shows it as well. Jaylen Brown is clearly kind of wanting to get more credit. I think he gets a bit frustrated when Tatum is talked about in a more glowing light than he is. But at the end of the day, he delivers more. He steps up more. He has those bigger moments. The coach, could argue, trusts him that little bit more. Not that Jaylen Brown doesn't get equal opportunity. And I think it's just time that they really just go all in on Tatum and find the best route around him outside of a guy like Jaylen Brown to really drive this Celtics team towards success. And it's the perfect time because there's no more just seeing how it goes with this. You're making a massive commitment. I think that if they give Brown the Supermax, they're committing nearly, I think, over $600 million to Tatum and Brown.
Something like that.
That is insane amount of money for a duo we've seen together, and we've seen enough to say that maybe they're going to be good, but just not good enough when it comes to titles.
Yeah, and it's such a complex conversation to talk about Supermaxes because this isn't the fault of the players, this isn't the fault of the teams, this is the fault of the collective bargaining agreement that they came up with, and this is to keep players around so that teams like the Lakers don't just scoop everybody up. And it has its repercussions, and it's going to have further repercussions in this new CBA where there's going to be more restrictions on the kind of contract you can send out to role players. That's essentially what it comes down to. When you have two Supermax guys, it's going to just be plain out more difficult to build out your team. You're choosing a path of two big megastars as opposed to a more balanced team. And that's a decision that teams can't make lightly now. And the Celtics could be the first example of a team that did not take that lightly and are kind of trapped. And I think the important thing is if you're going to be quote unquote trapped and having two Supermax players, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with it. And I don't think that, narrative wise, I think it's important to consider like who is the guy for sure, in terms of identity of the team and style of the team as well. I think toggling between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum was a lot of the same. And that can be devastating for a team that has no answer for that. And if you have a team that has no answer for that 3-level scoring threat on both wings like that, that's tough. And all regular season long, it was difficult for every team in the league. That's why the Celtics were one of the best regular season teams in the league. But it's also why they were at times wildly inconsistent and just showed flashes of just confusingly bad basketball. And I think it's hard to parse out what aspects of that are due to the one-dimensional mindset of their coaching system versus the roster construction with them, lacking like I said, everyone said this already, so this isn't new, but they lack a lead playmaker. They lack a true point guard. They haven't had one in a while. And if you're going to have two Supermax guys, I mean, I would ideally envision a point guard alongside Jason Tatum. I mean, Jason Tatum, a guy who could do a lot off the ball, a guy who can definitely be a elite and is an elite secondary playmaker, but is not going to handle, the kind of defense that you encounter down the stretch against a team like the Warriors, against a team like the Heat, and what they can do to a non-all-NBA type point guard playmaker. Tatum's a scorer, amazing two-way player. I don't want anyone to take anything away from what he did in the series, because I think that shouldn't be his job on a championship team. He's not Luka Doncic. Like, he should not have the ball that much in his hands. And Jaylen Brown as well. I mean, Jaylen Brown should not be a primary playmaker. And when Tatum got hurt, I mean, that had to go to him because Brogdon wasn't healthy. And there's only so much you can squeeze out of Derek White, who has had another fantastic showing. But they need someone. And I don't know if you'll let me do a crazy trade idea. We should probably discuss more before I go off the rails about it. But
well, I mean, you've mentioned it now.
Do
so
it?
yeah, give me a crazy trade idea.
Okay, all right. And this is listen. This is gonna be super. This is gonna be dumb. This is stupid. But I'm thinking outside the box because you have to think of outside the box, and you have to consider the fact that they're going to be facing this terrible situation. They need a playmaker, right? They need someone who fits the timeline, right? And they need someone of equal talent. I mean, you don't want to lose that investment because Jaylen Brown's a hell of a player, an amazing player. He is a Supermax player for sure. I can't help but look across the league. You look at, similar contracts, and I don't know how this works out, but Trae Young is going to be on a similar contract. Trae Young, a guy that has a lot of questions about his future there in Atlanta. A guy who needs a team that can protect him defensively, something that the Celtics have. And a guy who could work seamlessly with a guy like Rob Williams, a guy who could work seamlessly with a wing threat like Jason Tatum. Questions about his character, sure, maybe. But I think when you're the Celtics, you have to start exploring what you could do to maximize Tatum. This isn't about breaking up Brown and Tatum because they don't work well together, because they have worked well together, but it's about bring it to the next level, because I think he's a next level type of player, and having that pressure taken off of him. And maybe Trae Young too. Maybe Trae Young in the right situation, he gets back to that shooting form that he had a couple of years ago. I mean, there's potential there too. But I'm putting that out there as an example of something creative that Celtics need to do, because I don't think running it back is the answer when you're not going to have options. You're going to have no way out. This isn't just, all right, let's just see how it is. You're going to be stuck. And that's my crazy idea. Come for me, drop a comment on how dumb that is. I'm sure it's dumb, but tell me something better. Tell me something better than just running it back and seeing the same situation year after year, because they just don't have it.
Yeah, I mean, when you were mentioning that, I was almost thinking about something crazier, and even like a move to possibly think about bringing Kyrie back out to Boston, something like that.
He would never come back.
I was thinking even crazier than that, but that's an interesting one. I think when you think about what you want to build as just a formula on paper outside of actual players, you think you want a dominant two-way wing and potentially elite point guard. If you can draft those two when you're building the team, or find those two around the league when you're building the team, you kind of feel like you're in the right mold to be building a championship level squad. So maybe that could be something that the Celtics should be looking at an elite traditional playmaker playing alongside a great defensive playmaker like Marcus Smart, who's capable of doing some playmaking himself, is capable of scoring, capable of hitting trees, but the defense is the big thing he brings. There's ways to improve this team at this juncture going into next season. But like you said, before we move on from this, it's the last word, like you keep saying, they are going to be stuck if they go ahead and commit to Jaylen Brown and commit to the Brown Tatum duo winning the Boston Celtics multiple championships over the next decade. They're going to be stuck with that, and they're going to have little to no wiggle room to get out of that. So Boston, I've seen it said in a few places, it's time to realize that anything can be on the table this year for this team in this offseason. Anything should and can and should be on the table for them. And I think you're on the right track there. I think an elite point guard is the area that they should be looking at. Another question mark for this team. Can I
put a couple numbers there real quick? And I think this is important. And maybe we can also use this to address the question about coaching, because I thought the variety of offense was a symptom of this problem we're talking about. And you just look at the numbers. I mean, they have an elite lob threat sitting right in front of them. When Rob Williams is a roll man, he's scorching 1.5 points per possession on pick and roll. And he's a guy that you saw at times like how dominant he was against the size of the Heat. With the Boston playmakers, they just struggle in the pick and roll. I mean, Marcus Smart, turnover percentage, 25%. 1 out of every 4 pick and roll possessions, he's turning the ball over. Jaylen Brown, 21%. And Tatum was passable. And they just didn't have anyone elite. So Brogdon was the only guy there. So roster construction, that's right there. But also coaching, finding ways to get Williams more involved and finding ways to run more than, quote unquote, their randomness that they love to run, which works a lot more in the regular season when you're getting stops and you're getting open shots and in the fast break, and you're really just able to take advantage of a lot of chaos you can create in the open court and in the regular season. I just think that those two things alone tell me both of these things can be true, that Jaylen Brown, that money is better spent on a playmaker, a true playmaker. And unfortunately, Mazzulla, who's I thought has done a great job in the regular season, did not show enough to prove that he should be coaching a team who has immediate championship aspirations. I don't think he's a bad coach. So he did great in the regular season, but that doesn't cut it in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. I think you got to remember the fact that it was Joe Mazzulla was kind of put in place almost as just as a temp, really.
Yeah,
that was the original reason that he was put in there. It was not because they wanted to get a legit replacement for Ime Udoka, who had that great year before, and he struggled in the playoffs. There's been like different issues people have kind of questioned, looking at kind of timeouts and different things like that, which I wouldn't read too much into. But Robert Williams is a big one. He was so much more impactful last season in the playoffs on both ends, and in this year it was mainly just the defensive impact. His defensive impact was obviously still great, but he can definitely be a two-way threat. He can definitely offer a lot more to whatever team he's on as an offensive threat. You just have to try to play to him. Maybe that's the problem with Brogdon going down. We didn't get to see enough of what Williams could do. The problem not having that elite playmaking, like you said, and then with just the little things that out of Mazzulla, it was just the light was shining on him, and more often than not, he did not come up with the right formula, the right answer.
Yeah, and totally bailed out too by Derek White in Game 6. That ATO as well, that the last play of the game, just nothing there. And that's, I think, a microcosm of the lack of offensive variety, the lack of, just relying completely on the three. But that's where I stand with the Celtics, man. I think that they have way too much talent to not be in the finals right now. And it's a shame. It's an absolute shame, because I thought they would have been a fascinating matchup with the Nuggets, but we'll be talking about that eventually. I think that that would have been such a good chess match. But I mean, just put the odds again against the Heat and see what happens. They've proved it time and time again.
That's the big thing. They keep on coming up trumps, and I was a big doubter of them, and I've already admitted that I was wrong, and I was ready to write them off after they weren't able to just close out on Game 6. I thought that they were destined to go and lose in Boston, but obviously we don't know the impact of the injury might have had, but still, regardless of the injury, they still went and blew out the Celtics on their home floor. And you look at like Brown, obviously had as many field goals as turnovers, 8, had more turnovers than the entire Heat starting lineup. Yeah, that's not great. Obviously, good work out of the Heat. The Heat are just that sort of team. They can throw up so much at you that you just get confused, and you're just not the same. You're not the same player. One final player I want to mention on the Celtics before we get into the finals is Grant Williams. He was a guy that was almost a non-factor in the playoffs. It felt like he obviously had that unbelievable closeout game against the Bucks last year. That was his main claim to fame in the playoffs. But on the whole, he had a really big impact across the entire playoff run last year. And then this year, he was barely playing minutes. I think he was averaging 10 less minutes than he was last year. Never really had much impact on any of the games, and it was just a bit strange to see how that went down.
Yeah, and I thought he did have some really key moments defensively. They put him against Jimmy Butler, made Jimmy Butler uncomfortable in the post using his body, and he's shown it at times, even defending Giannis last. And he's just a guy that I thought would have had a much bigger role this season. But that's what you see when you get a coaching change. I don't know what sort of allegiance that Udoka had to Grant Williams, that he really invested in him. He blossomed under him, but I don't know what commitment Mazzulla had to him. And it seemed like that was little to none, because you saw throughout the regular season that he'd throw out Hauser over him. He'd choose to go big with their shooting bigs. And the reason I'm not even remembering their names right now is because we haven't seen them dusted off this entire playoff series, unless it's the end of the game. But he just was the last option. And I think it was a vicious cycle of him understanding you need to play for contract, understanding that he had higher expectations because of last year. And I think trying to evolve as a player as well. Because I think one big thing that he did last year is really evolve more a wing style of play. Like, you put the ball on the floor, you could attack the closeout, you could drive baseline and kick it out. Like, he did a lot more than just like you stand in the corner and be PJ Tucker. Like, he did a little bit more. And I think maybe the combined pressure of all that made it harder, but he was a guy that I thought would have a bigger role and didn't. And that's what happens when you don't play him. I mean, I think there's value to, in the regular season, you play through growing pains, and whether that's a cold streak or whatnot. But Grant Williams is a guy that was not invested in throughout the regular season and was kind of cast aside as soon as he started to make mistakes. And you're not going to be able to just throw him back in the lineup consistently in the playoffs and just like say, hey, forget about that whole regular season where you played like crap and we pulled you every time you made a mistake and we let the media trounce you and didn't come to your defense. Like, I think he's a goner in the offseason, and I don't know if flourish is the right word, but I think he'll have a big role on another team with his defensive versatility and his shooting. I think he could have been much better for this team if they gave him a chance.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree on that. And final word, I'll just say I think it's definitely more likely that we'll see Joe Mazzulla not in Boston next year, but Jaylen Brown is still there. But I would definitely say I would like to see the Boston Celtics be aggressive in this offseason and make a move for Jaylen Brown. But let's forget about the offseason for a little while. We still got some time for actual basketball. The finals are only one day away. The Denver Nuggets versus the Miami Heat. We're either going to see the Denver Nuggets and Nikola Jokic win their first ever NBA title, or we're going to see Jimmy Butler win his first ring as an NBA player. I'm loving that narrative. Just that alone makes me excited for these playoffs, because I think I'll be happy with either outcome.
Yeah, and you gotta love the underdog mentality that both these teams bring, because we already know where the Heat come from, where those players come from, and everything they have to prove as individuals and as a team. And then you think about the Nuggets. Think about where Jokic came from. I mean, yeah, we know him as an MVP, but I mean, this guy had to work his way up from being a second-round pick. Look at MPJ, a guy who's been doubted by the whole league that he'd even stay healthy. Same thing with Jamal Murray, a guy who's looked at as a kind of a second-rate all-star. Aaron Gordon looked at like a second-rate all-star, shouldn't have even been. And I think he definitely deserved a chance of being an all-star this year, and he feels snubbed. I think both these teams have such big chips on their shoulder that this is going to be such an intense matchup. There's going to be no egos involved. Didn't even mention my boy Bruce Brown. He's a guy who plays constantly with a chip on his shoulder. I think both these teams are going to play with such intensity. Like this isn't a finesse team like you might think. You might think like, because you watch Jokic, oh, this is a very finesse team that they're going to face like this hard-nosed Heat team. Like, no, dude, they have some guys who are willing to go to war on that team as well. And we've already seen the beef that Jokic had with the Heat after his run in. What was that? That wasn't last season. Was that 2 seasons ago?
I think that was last season.
We bumped Morris in the back?
Yeah, that was last season, no?
Yeah, that was last season then. But there's bad blood there. There's two very similar mindsets and where these teams come from. No nonsense. They're coming for it. And I mean, this is going to be exciting. I hate seeing all people just shying away from watching it just because it's not Celtics, Lakers, blah, 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 blah. These two teams are really geared up to have a fun series.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we're almost forgetting a little bit about Denver. It's been so long since they swept away the
seriously,
since they swept away the Lakers. But I mean, this team is just offensive superiority. I mean, the offense this team is producing, they can get scoring from anywhere and everywhere. They got Jamal Murray. He is the hottest scorer in basketball right now. I mean, he went from being a 20-point per game scorer to a just under 28-point per game scorer in the playoffs. And he's actually averaging a higher points per game than he did in the bubble when he had some of his superhero games, those 2 50-point games. So he is just on an absolute heater now. He is showing that he was able to come back from that injury, not only get back to the same level, but actually improve on that. And the way he's playing at the moment, it's going to take some amount to cool him off. Maybe the little break might have a bad impact on that. Maybe it'll only just have the positive impact that they get that extra bit of rest. We'll have to wait and see on that. But I mean, the way that he's playing at this moment is out of this world. I mean, against the Lakers, 31 points, 37 points, 37 points, and then 25 in the closeout on a 50, 40, 90 averages. I mean, this guy is on a serious heater and playing alongside Jokic, who's just doing anything and everything. He is the best player in basketball right now. It's just going to be unbelievable to see what way the Heat go about trying to cool this offense down.
Yeah, and just to break down the Heat's formula for success, I mean, their two greatest defensive weapons have been the ability to toggle between switching. Bam's a fantastic switching defender, and playing the zone, mucking things up, forcing subpar playmakers to make tough decisions, turn the ball over, and getting in passing lanes, being aggressive, and just creating a lot of chaos. You're not going to switch against Jokic. That's not happening. And you're definitely not going to play zone against Jokic, because that's just the most fundamental understanding about basketball defense in the zone is you get a guy in the middle and a guy who can make quick decisions and pass the ball out, spray the ball out, suck in the defense, make the right pass. And Jokic is the best passer, in my opinion. He's the best passer in NBA history. And I think a lot of statistical gurus out there will agree with me. But that he in the league right now, he's the best passer in the league. He makes quick decisions. He's got the fastest decision making out of any passer in the league. And that's just not a guy you're going to play zone against. So, I mean, two major weapons that the Heat have right now defensively are kind of out. And you play straight up. What are your matchups going to be? Who are you putting Butler on? Are you putting Butler on Murray? Are you putting Bam on Jokic? Obviously. And that's going to be the question right there is is Bam going to be able to handle Jokic one-on-one? And I think quite obviously the answer is no. And this isn't a knock on Bam. I mean, Bam is like a prototypical, like a prototype for switching the NBA and facing teams that go small, and facing a team like the Celtics, where you're not really worried about Rob Williams, but you got to be ready to switch up on Jason Tatum, switch up on Brown. But in the low post, there's going to be a very, very heavy toll that it's going to take on Bam, and Spoelstra's going to have to go deep in his roster to figure out how he wants to defend and just throw guys out there who are willing to take fouls, because Jokic is just going to score down there all day long if they don't stop him.
Yeah, for sure. I think in Patriot and Con, you're thinking a lot of switching between even Butler and Bam, switching between Murray and Jokic. I feel like we could see that in multiple sets, even though obviously Butler be giving up a hell of a lot of size, but the defensive dog that he is, I think you could see plays where he's guarding him, similar to like when we saw with LeBron in that series against Denver. Obviously, it didn't work out too well for the Lakers then, but maybe it can work out a little bit better for the Heat. But it's going to be so tough for them. And I mean, like, who else are you thinking is going to be able to have that sort of impact, like outside of Bam? I mean, Kevin Love could be important here. I mean, crazy fact about him. This is 5th time he's made the playoffs, 5th time he's made the finals. kind of insane. He's going to have an impact in this series. He's got to have one for the Miami Heat to succeed. And outside of that, though, you're kind of like, who else are you thinking? What other players are going to? Is Udonis Haslem going to get some minutes on that there?
Well, I think Zeller's always going to be out there. I mean, Zeller's a body. Zeller's a guy who's you force Jokic to work, and you force him to, use his body, get to the line, and Zeller's not going to have an impact on him besides, just minutes that he's not scoring 20 points in a quarter. But I think one wrinkle that they could explore is offensively. Can they make Jokic work offensively? That's where they're gonna have to tilt it. So I think nobody's going to really be thinking, how can we stop Jokic? How can blah blah blah. But I think you know that Jokic is going to score no matter what. If you double him, he's going to get it to the right guy. I think they're just going to have to live a lot with Jokic just kind of getting down low. And you send a double, you dig down, you find the worst shooters, and you try to double from there. And I know that Jokic is going to figure that out as well. But you really have to pressure them offensively, to take it to them first. And I'm really, really, really excited to see the matchup between their shooters, because I think they're very similar when you think about it. Like, you think about the movement shooters that they got, and you got Strus, Vincent, Robinson. They're going to meet their match in MPJ, Murray, and KCP. I mean, these three on both teams have been really lighting up from beyond the arc. And a lot of these games, I think, are going to come down to how well they can shoot, because the Nuggets are going to be forced to take the ball out of Jokic's hand. We've seen it time and time again, and sometimes it works. It worked. Phoenix got that to work for a game. Minnesota got that to work for one game. But pretty much Jokic has just been like, he will take whatever the defense gives him. If you are going to just throw one guy, I don't care if it's Anthony Davis, he's going to keep coming. And that's the thing that really impressed me about Jokic last series, is that Anthony Davis just, like, he treated him like another guy. Did not care if he got blocked 2 times in a quarter, 4 times and a half. Doesn't matter. Like, he's going to keep coming, because he knows that eventually that pressure is going to matter. And I think the Heat, if any team is going to be able to double and recover the way that you just have to when you're going to get a mismatch with Jokic in the paint, like, it's going to be the Heat. I mean, the Heat have just always been so crisp on their rotations, and they're one team that can manage it. But I mean, the answer is the long win against Zeller, sure. Omer Yurtseven, just get in there and get some fouls in, protect Bam from getting in foul trouble. That's pretty much it.
Yes, I guess maybe the more clear answer is make sure they get Jimmy Butler in Jamal Murray's face and try and get him to do what he can to limit the scoring of Jamal Murray a little bit. That's kind of a more realistic, simplistic game plan for the Heat. I think the offense is going to be interesting for Miami. in my head, judging off what we've seen so far, it feels like Butler is going to have to be going back to Himmy Butler in this series for Miami to be able to come out on the right side of it. I mean, he's going to have to go back to what he did in that Bucks series, averaging 37.6 points per game, just playing insane hero level basketball. And even that might not be enough. It could end up being like a sort of LeBron level of performance going up against those dominant Warriors teams where he can do this, that, and everything, and it's just not enough. Not to say this that this Nuggets team is as dominant as that Warriors team, but it kind of feels like that sort of level, especially with the offense and where this Heat team is coming from. But like you keep saying, like you doubt them at your peril. It's going to be big for Duncan Robinson. He's the Heat's best shooter, and he had 2 wide open looks from 3. And when that's your best shooter in a key moment in the playoffs, he's got to be going 1 or 2 at least on those 2 shots that he had to close out the game.
Yeah, I'm giving him a pass.
I'll let him have the pass because he's still a role guy and he's still someone who's stepped up big from what he was doing in the regular season compared to now. But if those moments come around again in the finals, he's got to be ready for them.
Yeah, and I think he will. I think if it's not him, you got Strus. If it's not Strus, you got Vincent. And I think they've done really good. They've done a really good job to work in their rotations, whoever's got the hot hand. And it feels too that like there's such a perfect balance between those guys of like knowing their role, but also feeling super confident in whatever they do. I mean, Strus is not scared to put the ball on the floor and get to the basket. And same goes for both Vincent and Robinson, the guys who usually would be afraid to do that, afraid to make the wrong move, afraid to make the wrong pass. But these guys should feel super empowered to do that. And if they don't have the hot hand, they're not shooting well, they've proven to be versatile enough to keep the Heat's offense going, at least keep the ball moving, keep trying to get dribble penetration, at least trying to take a shot. And if Duncan Robinson doesn't got to go on, you got other guys there. And I think the question I have too about these 3 is the fourth is, are we going to see Tyler Hero? What do they say? Game 3, maybe? Yeah. I think that's enough time to evaluate whether or not you need to add him back. I'm not sure how healthy he'll be. Just because he's healthy doesn't necessarily mean that it's such a fine balance. Do you reinsert a player who does a lot of different things and can help you a lot? And if anyone's going to reinsert a player, it's going to be the Heat. Mm-hmm. You see Oladipo go down, you see Hero go down, you insert Caleb Martin, and boom, you have one of the best players in the playoffs right now. And just easy as that. So maybe this is not the team to worry about with that. But I think Hero would bring a lot of benefit to what they want to do offensively. And before we get into that, I want to talk about what the Heat maybe could explore offensively. I did want to go back real quick and talk about the Heat's defense. And one thing I'm curious to see if they do, because we saw this a little bit against the Lakers. We saw the Lakers spend a couple quarters just completely leaving Aaron Gordon alone, and that really started to muck things up for the second unit. And I think the Heat are going to look at that, and you're going to have to find some way, somehow, just to let something go. And I think it's going to be that. We'll see how much Spoelstra tries to play Aaron Gordon off the floor and how that kind of opens up their offense if you're playing that defender off the floor, because Jimmy Butler, you need him to be Himmy, like you said. That's going to be tough if you got Aaron Gordon. I think that Jimmy Butler is able to use his quickness to probably get around Gordon, but I think with the style that he wants to play sometimes, grinding the paint, get in the mid post, you're not doing that over Aaron Gordon. He's too strong. He's too big. That's not going to happen. So they need to find a way to play him off the floor, and could be just that.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. One thing that's going to be important with Jimmy Butler in this series, one thing I didn't like that I saw in moments in game, especially in game 6, when it wasn't just that he wasn't hitting the shots or making the shots, he started to be hesitant. He started to not look for the ball on plays. You can't go that way. That's not going to be acceptable. That's just going to lead to losses for the Miami Heat. That He just has to shake it off. He has to do what all the best players do. They find some way of having an impact, whether that be making shots, getting to the foul line, making plays for others. He's got to always be making an impact. And like people were saying in the Lakers series with the Nuggets, for the most part, Jimmy Butler's got to touch the ball on the majority of possessions when he is on the floor.
Yeah, but the big difference here is I don't think they even necessarily have to attack Jokic every time in the pick and roll. I think, the ball in his hand, Jimmy Butler, if he's being guarded by Aaron Gordon, that's going to be, I think they'll really enjoy that. If you get Bam and Jimmy Butler in a Gordon Jokic action, even though Jokic has been pretty solid in the drop this year, this playoffs, Bam has not had the chance yet to be a lob threat. And who do you have to go through? He had to go through Giannis. He had to go through Brook. He had to go through Mitchell Robinson. He had to go through Al Horford, Rob Williams. It's just Jokic back there now. It's just Gordon. So, that's immediately a big plus for Butler and Bam, that pairing there. But then Bam can attack other people. Bam's going to attack Michael Porter Jr. Bam's going to attack Jamal Murray. Butler is going to attack all those guys. And I think he's going to find a lot easier time attacking the paint when you don't have a Rob Williams hovering in the back somewhere. You don't have an Al Horford hovering in the back somewhere. You don't have a Jason Tatum hovering in the back somewhere. Marcus Smart. All these guys who are such great help defenders and coming in and swooping in and taking the ball from you, smacking it away. Derek White. Derek White is such a underrated shot blocker. The Celtics have so many guys that are just going to come out of nowhere and just take away your drives, smack the ball. And the Nuggets don't have it. Nuggets have size though. But I think Jimmy Butler's not afraid of size. Jimmy Butler is going to want to get into contact. And I think this is going to be a big game for him to get his confidence back and get back to the line. I think he's going to really live at the line depending on how aggressive the Nuggets let him get, depending on if they're really going to be aggressive with him on pick and rolls just to take away his drive. But then you got Bam. Is Bam going to start to take over? So he has been solid at best offensively. He's shown moments where it's like, okay, he's starting to get there. But that really started to go away by the end of the series. And it just had to come down to the other guys and the shooters on this Heat squad. And Bam was just kind of a part of it. He wasn't leading it. But do you think he has an opportunity to kind of flip that around and really cement his presence on the offensive end against the Nuggets, given the kind of looks that he's going to get?
Yeah, the opportunity is always there for Bam Adebayo. It often comes down to how much he wants it. Yeah, he's not like the elite big guy scorer like an Embiid or an AD, but he can have a much bigger impact than he does. And I think this is a strong moment for him. I think he has to be implored by Spoelstra and the entire Heat team to harness this moment. He has to step up. He did it when the Heat were playing well, when the Heat were winning games in that series against Boston. Bam was a huge part of the offense. It's gonna have to be just like that again, except he's not going to be able to afford to have the games where he flails off and he struggles and he's not aggressive. Like you mentioned, there's going to be another possible option for him that they didn't really get to explore in any of the other series consistently. So with that, alongside a couple of other aspects, that could open up other avenues when you're fearing for that lob threat. So I think he could have a really big offensive impact on this series, and I think he's going to have to if the Heat are gonna cause any more surprises.
Yeah. Do you think you're gonna have the continued magic of Caleb Martin?
I wouldn't be so sure. As much as he's kept doing it, it's been great to watch, and he's kept on doing. Obviously, yeah, they have three games scoring 20+ against the Celtics. This is a guy who's had a really big impact, and another guy who's been able to hit threes, but he's also hasn't been afraid to put the ball on the floor, and that's surprised teams at times. He's made a few kind of circus shots. It kind of feels like this is a really key moment for him in his career, and he's in a great vein of form. You always just feel with a guy like him, it's like it's going to have to stop somewhere. And for the Heat, they kind of can't really afford it, especially without a legit number 2 scorer when you don't know what you're going to get out of Bam with Hero not being there. They're going to need him to remain at this impactful level, even if it's not to the same extent when it's 20 points per game and he's kind of almost looking like the lead scorer on the team. But to continue to make his threes, to continue to be able to have a really strong scoring impact, they're gonna need that big time.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's easy to say it's just a heater and it's gonna go away eventually. And okay, he's not gonna be shooting like the percentage he is now. Like, he's shooting 54% from three. He's shooting still over 50% from the field. And I think that when you look at the shots he's getting, it's insane to me that how many shots he's getting at the end of the shot clock. You know, if Bam didn't want to take a shot, Jimmy Butler just running the doubles, and Caleb Martin just got to figure out the shot out of nowhere. And I think he had the most amount of like jaw dropping, like what, like how did he score? Like he just had so many moments where there was no flow to the offense and he bailed them out. I mean, he bailed out the Heat as many times, if not more, in this last series than Jimmy Butler did. And a lot of the shots that he's taking, like there's something there. Like he had a couple plays where he's taken Al Horford off the dribble, getting down low, stopping on a dime, and using footwork to get to a fade. And like that looks like if I didn't watch the league, I didn't know who this guy was, I'd be like, oh, that's what's that, like one of their best players? Like that didn't look random. That didn't look lucky. All these pull-up jumpers he's making. And this is my thing. This is getting down into the dirty details of like what the Heat could do with the amount of drop coverage that they want to run with Jokic. They're really going to be vulnerable to pull-up shooting, which they're going to be happy with Jimmy taking. He's only shooting 41% on pull-up mid-rangers. Do you want to know what Caleb Martin is shooting on pull-ups? He's shooting 72% on mid-range pull-ups. That's Devin Booker-esque, and again, not as big of a sample as Devin Booker. But I mean, they could really use him to be more aggressive here. I don't think you're going to see less Martin. I think you're going to see even more Martin. If they're going to have success, they're going to not only get in the paint, but they're really going to exploit the middle. They're going to have to exploit, getting to your runners, getting to your floaters. Who's going to be able to, and I think Gabe Vincent, he's been a guy who's been fearless getting in the paint. And that's where I'm curious with Tyler Hero, because Tyler Hero is a guy who he's got great touch in his floaters. He's willing to snake a pick and roll, get to the middle of the floor, get to his pull-up jumper, and they just need to have guys who are willing to consistently shoot that and not care. Because the Denver Nuggets, and they're not going to give up a lot. Their defense has been fantastic, but they're going to give that shot up, and I think they're really going to pressure these shooters to do more than just run around and catch and shoot threes, because they're going to fight through those. They're going to really pressure those shooters well. Yeah,
for sure. It's going to be a hell of an interesting battle. And have you got anything more to add before I ask you for your prediction? Do you have any final points?
Really, I think that this has been a fun conversation. It's been academic. It's been interesting. It's been a great thinking exercise for me to think about how the Heat could figure this out. And I don't want to be wrong again, but I'll just give my prediction right now. I mean, you're not stopping Nikola Jokic, and that's what it comes down to. Of all these situations we talked about, he's going to average 38 a game. With the way that the Heat can defend him, he's going to have one of the best finals MVP type performances that we've seen in generation against this Heat defense, which is one of the best defenses in this whole playoffs. But Jokic is that much better than this entire team. He's that much bigger. He's that much more skilled. I think this is Nuggets in 5.
I think I'm going to have to agree with you there. And just to clarify, you said one of the best defenses. They faced the best defense in the conference finals, and look what happened there. I think the Heat will have enough to even enough of a Jimmy Butler performance to steal a game, but I just think this Denver team is too strong. They have too much power on offense than they have. Like you said, Jimmy Butler could stake his claim as the best in the league if he's able to take down the Jokic, but at this moment, Nikola Jokic is the best player in basketball. The Miami Heat are not stopping him, and it's going to be a comfortable. They'll probably drop one, but yeah, 5 games for Denver, I think, is the way it's going to go. But make sure you watch anyway. We're wrong all the time, so maybe back to Miami.
This is
Heat
bad
now.
luck, man.
maybe back to Miami Heat right now, but it's still going to be a great series. We're going to see a first ring for a franchise, or we're going to see one of the all-time great stories, Jimmy Butler get his first ring.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. It all begins Thursday. That is going to do it for today's episode. My thank you to Chris, and thanks to all of you for joining us and listening. Remember, you like what you're hearing, follow, like, subscribe. We are everywhere on social media at Coast to Coast NBA. And most importantly, remember to take every shot and love every moment.
Peace out.